as we see these waves upon waves of migrants from different parts wanting to return back to their villages, are you at all surprised with the desperation that people are showing to go back home?
No, I think that, I mean, both the economic pressures are obvious. They're sort of, how will they live at home? Maybe they have a little bit of land and there's some rice or grains at home, and the family might have some other resources. So it's not, a lot of these people, they send their money home quite promptly, so they don't really have much to fall back on. The construction sites in particular often provide a place to stay. So if the construction sites are closed, I don't know where they're going to stay. They just, a lot of them sleep in, under the truck. But if the truck is now locked up, then they don't sleep under the truck. If they sleep in the construction site, if the construction site is closed, then they don't sleep there. And I think the initiative to kind of create a confidence building move where you set up comfortable places for them to stay. I mean, there's a lot of people and not a lot of capacity to do it, but if they can do it, I think people would have a very different view that look, I have a place to sleep, I have food, and it's going to be okay. I think right now the police being kind of little bit out of control, beating up people who are doing, so the rules are not on the ground, are not clear, so people are panicked. I think if there was a clarity saying, look, you have the right, you're a citizen, you have the right to live, if we are sending you home and you can't go home, we are shutting down your business and therefore you have to go home. I think it's very important that the state sends a signal that it's our job to take care of you, we'll do a good job, we're putting every effort into it to be treated with respect. It's not a matter of the police coming and threatening you if you do this or that. I think it's just the police should be instructed to be extremely respectful. These are very important. I think the panic is partly they have no idea what the next steps are.
You're saying they have no idea what the next steps are, and you're saying the state must in that sense intervene and send out that firm message. Many state governments are sending out those messages, stay back, stay at home, we'll provide you food, we'll provide you shelter. Should that have been done earlier? Many are saying that this message should have been coterminous with the message of the national lockdown, because that is what set off fear and panic, that people felt they're losing their jobs, they're losing their incomes, they're losing their livelihoods, and therefore out of desperation would rather be in the security of their homes. To that extent, do you think the messaging needs to be clearer, or could have been much clearer much earlier?
Yeah, it could have been clearer. I think the messaging to the police is extremely important also, because I think there's a lot of fear that comes from, the police sending out, I think, mixed messages, beating up people for opening grocery stores. So it's the clarity on what exactly is okay and what's not. What rights do we have? What's something I'm doing because, I think I'm a good person, I want to abide by the rules, I want to do something for society, and what's something I'm doing because I'm being threatened if I don't do it. I think it's very important to appeal to people's best instincts. I think the Prime Minister's speech today is an attempt to do that, but I think it's very important that that message goes to the police, that this is not a time to unleash a reign of terror.
The concept of social distancing also for the poor. If I'm living in a one-room tenement in Dharavi, or if I'm living in a jhuggi in Delhi, is very different to the elite privilege of the middle classes or the elite who can, discuss social distancing. Do you think social distancing as a concept also needs to be explained to the poor and the marginal much more effectively? When they now pile up and crowd up in buses and trains, it's perhaps because it's not a privilege for the poor.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is, look, yes, we'll get the disease, but, what's the alternative? I think that desperation is extremely important in what's going on. People, it's not that people have no idea. They understand that, going close. I mean, the idea that germs get transmitted from people, I don't think that's a difficult idea. I think people get it. I think what they don't get is, so what next? What do I do? Do I starve? I mean, I think the sense of a normality having broken down is extremely difficult to deal with, and they are having trouble dealing with it, and I don't blame them. I would have trouble dealing with it myself. I just wouldn't know what the expectations are. What's the what am I guaranteed? And I think that it's very important at this point to put resources into that, lots of resources into, I don't know why, I'm sure the hotels are all empty. Requisition them. At some level, I think this is not the time to respect private property. Just requisition them and just put people in there, make it so that it's nice rather than horrible. I think that there's a sense in which we're at some level be willing to be draconian, but not draconian with enough of the people who own private property.
Interesting what you're saying. Even requisition private property, requisition hotels in a way to provide shelter. Some bureaucrat to me suggested, former bureaucrat, take over a Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium, allow it to become a relief center for the poor. What you're suggesting is you need a much bigger social security net in a way, which involves presumably also direct cash in people's bank accounts through Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and their mobile, the JAM Trinity.
Right, absolutely. The JAM Trinity is, I mean, we've invested a lot in it. I think there are obviously defects with it, but I think with that, it's still an amazing infrastructure to have. We've been proud of it. Let's use it to get money in the hands of people. I do think that it's also important to just provide space, and for the migrants in particular, as you say, the Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium, just build quickly, build something that's not horrible, and the temperatures are going to go up, it's going to be extremely hot. Think of all those things and don't, I think, be realistic about what people will be able to bear. If you pick tin shades in the sun, they're going to be that much harder to hold people in. They're just going to be dying of heat. So I think that it's important to use every facility that's available, back, people in, but not close to each other, but in spaces. So, therefore we need space. And so that's why I'm saying, use all the schools are empty right now, use all the schools, private, public. I think that at some level that is in India, a lot of the infrastructure is private. And likewise, my view is that we shouldn't make the private public hospital distinction. After all, we have Ayushman Bharat. We can compensate later, but right now we should just use all facilities available.
We are getting reports from Kerala of Bengalis who migrants, laborer who want to go back home. We are getting reports from Kashmir, from Goa, where Kashmiris want to go back home because they've run out of money. Do you believe that, in a sense, this calls also for a revival of that debate, and even before the debate, perhaps just push it through, of some kind of a minimum income scheme? I know you were involved with the whole Nyay idea, the concept at just before the elections of 2019. Time to revive it, to think of a minimum income that cuts across all boundaries, not just say for one particular group here or one particular group there. All families below a poverty line all get a minimum income now.
Right. I think that's exactly right. I mean, whether or not I think we can use social mechanisms to discourage wealthier people from going for it. I think I think we have ways to do it. I think the main point is that if we try to identify who's a farmer, are you a farmer or not, I think this is the wrong time to do it. We don't have a lot of time in hand. We want people to start behaving, compliant with the rules. We want them to be calm. We want them to accept the next, I think it's going to be probably longer, but whatever, the next some weeks of real pain. And if we want to do it, we want to do it in a way that's, we don't want to be right now trying to identify, are you eligible or not? That's a question that we want to avoid. We want to just offer everybody something, and I think the PDS system I don't see why every state doesn't just make it all 100% free. And again, anybody who wants, just issue them a new stamp or something, and so that anybody who wants it can get some kilos of rice, etc. I just feel like this is the moment to be not be very picky and try to do it exactly right. I think there is the real need of the hour is action, not precision.
So would you say, for example, that this is a moment that the packages also that are being announced are too little? I read a few columnists today suggesting that what the government has done so far is peanuts. Do you believe that we just need to put a lot more money in these relief packages, given the scale of the impact of a national lockdown?
Yeah, I think, and even from a purely macroeconomic point of view, I think that makes sense. I think the economy is going to go into a tailspin. The US has just agreed to spend $2 trillion to essentially shore up the economy, because otherwise, I mean, they are predicting that the US economy will shrink by 25% in this quarter. That's a Goldman Sachs prediction. I don't know whether it's how precise that is, but if we have anything like that, it's going to be very hard to revive. We want just macroeconomic sense at this point demands that we spend more money. I don't think we need to be, there's any gains from being pusillanimous. We can sit on on the money we have, but we'll see everything disappear. This is the time to spend.
There are farmers, of course, who are harvesting in parts of the country, Professor Banerjee, but it's the urban poor who seem to be hurting most, the daily wage laborers, those who work in the informal sector. Has this been a class which has been ignored for much too long? I know a lot of your studies have focused on them. Are they the most vulnerable in a way to this lockdown and the complete disruption in their lives?
I think they are very vulnerable to the fact that they might both lose their livelihoods and their lives, because I think the urban slums are going to become, if I had to predict where some hot spots would be, it would be one of those places, because it's just very hard to have, if any infection goes there, they'll spread. I just don't see a way. I mean, your toilets, they are not cleaned very well, they are shared. I mean, this is just a way to get a lot of this, you're getting all these surfaces which you have to touch, and the germs need to live on surfaces for 3 days. I just feel that there is a sense in which we need to both think of these people having lost their livelihoods, they lose their lives as well. That's really catastrophic. On the other side, I do think that we underestimate how closely the rural economy is tied to the urban economy. A lot of these people send money back home. That's precisely why they're panicked, is that they actually have sent their money back home already, and they don't have cash. They've been paid, but they don't hold on to a lot of cash. They send it back home. A lot of the transmission from urban India to rural India happens through migrants' remittances, and these remittances are going to be gone. They're gone. So I think the rural economy will start hurting fast.
You're saying in the short term, provide therefore cash in people's hands and provide as much as possible cash and food. But there is also the challenge of the public health system.
And shelter. Shelter is very important.
So I get it. Shelter, food and cash critical at the moment. But there's also the question of public health, providing them access to public health. I read an article which you've written this morning where you've said mobile vans are needed, perhaps mobile teams of doctors going to specific villages or areas where potential outbreaks can take place. Therefore, that calls also for an increased investment, presumably, Professor Banerjee, in public health, something which this country has often ignored.
I think in the long term, I think one lesson we take away from this is that we have really, our infrastructure isn't there. We really can't deal with such things. I think, if we escape with anything other than a massive tragedy, we'll be very lucky, but we should not take that as a lesson that we'll escape the next time. I think we should be, I hope we escape. It breaks my heart to think about the alternative, but I don't know that we will, and I think we need, in the longer run, we need investment. Right now, I think what we need is not investment as much as investment. Yes, we should buy ventilators if we can get them, but the world market for ventilators is we should get anybody who can manufacture ventilators to manufacture them as fast as possible. Right. My guess is that even if this lockdown actually works, we're still going to get a massive increase in the number of people who will need to be put on ventilators. And so I think we should try to get them out, and hopefully what's going to happen, the most optimistic scenario is that the infections are going to be clustered. And so we can actually, and the clusters will be different over time. So maybe in Dharavi at this point, and in somewhere else, say 2 weeks later, so that we can move the resources around to deal with it. We should think of it as, that's why I was talking about the mobile teams. I think it's very important. The best case scenario is in a sense where we don't have one unified catastrophe all at once, in which case we just don't have the resources to the healthcare.
There's one other concern, Professor Banerjee, the gap between, let's say, the states which are perhaps better prepared, in most of them down south, and those in the north, the traditional Bimaru states. Does that worry you, particularly as we see this interstate migration, the growing divide between south and north going ahead?
It's a very frightening thought. I mean, it's a very frightening thought, because I think the people are going to come home to the villages with infections, and without, I think, even the knowledge to detect what are symptoms, and it's going to create both, I think, fear and misunderstanding, and lack of treatment. The healthcare infrastructure in the villages is extraordinarily weak. We've studied this for many years. Most of the people practicing medicine don't have medical qualifications, and for them this particular new condition is just a mystery. So I think we need to start training, providing video trainings to all the kind of the rural healthcare providers, whether or not they have medical degrees. We should try to sort of enroll them, and so that and the important thing is not that they can cure it. There's no cure, but they can at least identify hotspots. They can say, this is where I'm seeing a lot of people with high fever and breathing problems.
So you're saying spread awareness. Am I correct? That we need much greater awareness. You're worried about the nature of awareness, given the sharp income divides in a country like ours, the geographical divide I just spoke of. We need much greater awareness, presumably a massive awareness program now.
Yes, massive awareness program, and a program which also designates a lot of people in the village community as respondents, who say that, please be on the lookout. If you see a lot of people saying the same thing, report it to a hotline. Let's get the information out. Where are the pockets? I think it's very important the information itself is not there. We don't have the testing, so we can't just do testing like Korea did. So what we're going to have to do is just wait for the symptoms to appear, and then treat that as a pocket of high infection, and then maybe quarantine that area, and then try to put medical resources there. I think that's the best bet we have.
Let me ask you one final question. You're in the United States, and look at what's happening where you are. Is there a big lesson that India can learn from the United States, or do you believe the treatment and the diagnosis has to be different? The diagnosis and the treatment has to be different in different parts of the world?
No, I think in some sense, I think in the US the lesson is very similar to that in India, that we sort of didn't start acting on it early enough. We could have perhaps, we have a very good pharma industry. The US is a very good pharma industry. The US is the best pharma industry in the world, but India is a very strong one. We could have just requisitioned, imperfect tests, but tests that we could use on a large scale. And then we could start to have identify the disease like Korea did in the population and not just among the infected.
Right. In conclusion, Professor Banerjee, if there is one immediate piece of advice that you want to give, I know you've given a lot in the past 15-20 minutes, but if there's one top priority, does it come back to what you told me? Food, cash, and shelter for the urban poor, or the poor in general, must now be prioritized, and sensitizing the police?
Yes, and making sure that everybody feels that this is it will be a problem that will be managed. I think if people completely panic that this is going to go haywire, that's a problem. that's going to make it worse. I think people need to be assured that we are doing all the things needed to re-establish a kind of at least a stable environment. I think the sense of, everything that we took as granted is gone is really frightening.